All right, I want to talk about clerics. Now, cleric was one of the original three classes in the original Dungeons and Dragons. The other two being the fighting man and the magic user. Now, the fighting man and the magic user and the thief all have examples that you can go at throughout history, throughout legends and history, but the cleric does not. There are religious figures in legends and religions, and these religious figures, they all tend to be a philosopher to some extent, and they all have their own philosophy, and but these religious figures have a tendency to fit the pattern of being either a warrior or a wizard. They don't really fit. There's no archetype of the cleric in the legends, even though there are religious people in legends. They're either warriors like Muhammad or King David or Joshua, or they're wizards like Moses or Jesus or Buddha. So, yeah. So it was really odd that they would include this cleric class in the original Dungeons and Dragons. I think part of the inspiration for it was that Hammer was making a bunch of Dracula movies with Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. And so part of the cleric was inspired by the turn undead ability that Cushing displayed in the Dracula movies. And part of it was inspired by the Knights Hospitaller, which was a medieval order of knights who I believe weren't allowed to use bladed weapons. They could use maces, but they couldn't use swords. And so clerics have their own group of spells, but many times the spells duplicate the things that another class can do, like hold person. One thing is unique about clerics is curing wounds is something that only clerics can do. I know druids can do it in first edition AD&D, but druids are conceived of as being a variant of cleric. So, yeah, lately I've been playing Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I feel like the cleric was the biggest loser in the conversion to Lamentations. So, one thing is clerics in original Dungeons and Dragons, they were not allowed to use spells until second level. They were the almost fighters. They weren't allowed to use spells until second level. By advance, they were allowed to use one spell. If you look at third edition, they're allowed one first level spell plus a domain spell plus 3 zero level spells. So that's a little better. That's 5 spells you can do compared to 1 for a cleric. And that's another issue, is how many spells I could do. And they had 8-sided hit dice in advance. And in Lamentations, that has been decreased to 6-sided, which is not as good. And another thing is clerics who had a high wisdom could get some extra spells. I've been using this, but I've recently come to the conclusion that since clerics can't risky cast, that they should get a number of extra spells for every level equal to their wisdom bonus. And so I've done away with that. But if you look at the roll to hit charts from first edition, you'll see that thieves and magic users, in order to hit the 10, which was the worst armor class when you're doing descending armor class, they had to roll an 11. While that was the same as 0 level fighters, while first level fighters only had to roll a 10, which was also true of clerics. So clerics could roll to hit just as good as fighters at first. Then at third level, fighters improved. They needed 8 to hit armor class 10, while for clerics, it wasn't until 4th level that they caught up. And then at 5th level, it was at 5th level that fighters pulled ahead of clerics, and they would never catch up. They'd fall further and further ahead of clerics. So in the low levels, clerics had almost as many hit points as a fighter, and they could often hit as well as a fighter, or almost as well. So that's, and in Lamentations, clerics don't hit as well as fighters. Everybody who's not a fighter is only +1 to hit. If I could do that in so yeah, clerics have lost out on the roll to hit thing, and it also lost out on the spells. That if you look at the cleric spells, have got a lot fewer spells here. It's one of the strengths of Lamentations of the Flame Princess is they divided the spells completely between magic users and clerics. There's no spell in common except dispel magic, and even then they have different versions of it. So there are fewer spells for clerics. There's only 4 7th level cleric spells. It's like half as many as I had in advanced. Let's take a look at that. So I compare this. Should have marked this twice. Okay, yeah, so this the 7th level cleric spells. There's 10 of them. And there's only 4 of them for Lamentation, so that's a lot fewer. So yeah, clerics are a big loser, and in some of the more recent stuff that Raggi has been trying to do away with the cleric class. And so he's told people, if you're writing a module, don't have the bad guy be a cleric. Which is a real shame, because there have been some fun dungeons where the big bad guy was a cleric who's twice the level of the players. So not only did he have spells, but he also had a lot of hit points. But not for Lamentation. So that's my little spiel about clerics, that I still allow clerics, but and one of the things I like about 3rd edition is you could substitute a spell that you've memorized for a healing spell. And I do that in my campaigns too. Because if you don't do that, then the players will not memorize the useful spells. They'll just do all the healing spells so they can be heal bots. So that's my little spiel on clerics.